first arrived in Singapore in January 1999, having just completed my PhD at the University of Nottingham. My doctoral work was on urban development issues in Malaysia, so I was very excited to have the opportunity to join the Department of Geography here at NUS. And it was during the time when I was a postdoc in the Department of Geography that what was then the Centre for Advanced Studies changed to become the University Level Research Institute, which we now know as ARI, the Asia Research Institute. I wasn't involved in ARI at the outset, but I was part of a cohort of postdocs at that time that included some who did become part of the Asia Research Institute. And I collaborated with some of them. But my initial interest in ARI was as someone who, like lots of people today, just likes to attend the many events and seminars that were being held at that time in the early 2000s. But increasingly, research that's done at ARI also straddles a divide between humanities and social science research and many other areas of expertise, especially in the sciences. So we have research projects on environmental issues, on invasive species, on carbon sinks. Clearly each new director does inflect the Institute with their own interests and priorities and expertise, and also an institute like ARI changes like every other academic institute according to new research priorities, new opportunities and such like. One thing I can say that is of course the ARI that I, if you like, inherited when I became director in 2019 is one that's very much on the international map. So I can't take any credit for that whatsoever. That's all down to the hard work of directors and lots of other people associated with ARI going back for 2 decades. My own vision for ARI is to continue to push the Institute in a way which means that we're able to engage the kinds of important, significant issues which require expertise from collaborations and groups of people. That could be collaborations across various disciplines within the humanities and social sciences. But we also know that many of the most pressing problems of our times are ones that require humanities and social science knowledge, but also require that we as humanities and social science scholars collaborate with people from other disciplines too. Climate change, food security, these are all issues that, of course, you need social science expertise, but you need collaborative relations and research with people with other kinds of skills and backgrounds too. To the extent that I can identify a new strand or emphasis, I think it's one which pushes us to collaborate further with people who are further removed from our own comfort zones in order to be able to tackle these bigger problems, wicked problems that require multiple perspectives and skill sets. There are very few other Asian studies institutes around the world that, first of all, have the kind of critical mass of scholars and diversity across disciplinary backgrounds that ARI does. And to the extent that there are other institutes that perhaps could name a similar number and diversity of scholars, they don't tend to have their own physical institute base. They're often virtual centres that bring together people in name without necessarily bringing them together for collaborative projects and in a shared space. So in that regard, I think ARI is possibly unique in world terms. Of course, the pandemic has challenged much of that modus operandi. Very few people have been able to come in to work physically in this dedicated space that we have. But over many, many years, I think that's been one of the key distinguishing features of ARI as compared to other Asian studies institutes around the world. For me, when I first joined ARI well over a decade ago as a cluster leader, the thing that I most valued was the opportunity for research leadership. Research leadership, collaborating with other people who have shared interest in Asia and perhaps a shared topical focus, bringing together their perspectives from different disciplines. So even before I came to ARI, I was quite accustomed to collaborating with other geographers, with other people who think in rather similar ways to me. But what was distinctive about coming to ARI was the opportunity to collaborate with people who had very, very different disciplinary backgrounds, inheritances, and made me see things that I took for granted in very different ways. That makes for a really fertile, rich, and also challenging intellectual environment. For 2 decades, ARI each year has recruited some of the brightest and best talents in humanities and social science working on Asian topics, and not surprisingly during that period there have been a significant number of Singaporean scholars, some of whom have been trained here in Singapore, some of whom were trained overseas and wanted to come back to Singapore, and they have been some of the key players in ARI's lineup of postdoctoral fellows, for example, over the years. Some returning Singaporeans have continued to work at NUS and at other universities in Singapore. Others have used ARI as a stepping stone to continue their research overseas. So there's certainly been a Singaporean component to ARI's postdoctoral fellow lineup and also research fellows. I guess another way of thinking about research capacity is international scholars who've come to Singapore, stayed in Singapore. Some, like me, have become permanent residents and have made contributions to the university and higher education scene more broadly in Singapore. We have a remarkable alumni network, which is a great resource for ARI as an institute, but of course is also a wonderful resource for NUS, and arguably for Singapore too, almost as a kind of soft power around the world. There are many people who trace ARI as part of their career path, and there's a significant component of their research identity, research selves, and that's something that we're particularly keen to make sure that we nurture and nourish during this anniversary year. I think the other thing to think about in terms of capacity building, we quite rightly usually think about capacity building at the initial postdoctoral stage, the early career stage, but ARI also provides opportunities for research leadership, perhaps mid-career people who get the opportunity, like I did, to come in and establish and lead a research cluster. That can be, in some cases, their first opportunity of interdisciplinary research leadership. So I think it's important that we think about capacity building partly in terms of postdoctoral opportunities, but also in terms of research leadership, and also in terms, even more generally, I think, of the kind of intellectual environment that ARI helps to build and sustain. If there have been hundreds of people who have come through here as postdocs, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who've participated in ARI events, either as speakers, as audience members, as chairs, and that includes many graduate students, even undergraduate students at NUS, members of the public. So I take that in a broad sense as a way in which ARI has also contributed to building an intellectual milieu which extends way beyond NUS campus within Singapore and internationally. I think it's very important to continually to be attentive to new opportunities. So much has been disrupted, as we all know, in the past year or so by COVID-19. COVID-19 also is an interesting and important, vitally important object of analysis in its own right. So this is something I think that perhaps none of us would have predicted, or very few of us would have predicted even 2 years ago. But there's certainly a place for critical humanities and social sciences scholarship on COVID-19. Understandably, the bulk of the initial research on that topic is epidemiological, or to do with health dimensions. But there are all kinds of longer-term social science questions that are raised by COVID-19. Its politics, the economic dimensions, the social dimensions, well-being, interfaces with issues of religion and such like. So I see COVID-19 as a really important topic of future research at ARI in its own right, and perhaps more broadly where ARI can make a contribution to Asian-centred humanities and social science research internationally. But there are several other longer-standing themes, I think, which I'm very keen to see grow at ARI. One, which certainly is long-standing but has become no less important, is sustainability and climate change. Much of the important science around climate change has been known for many decades, And I think many of the most difficult, vexed problems as regards climate change actually have to do with the human dimensions, the politics, the cultural and the social dimensions, which scientists, that's just not their area of expertise. So it requires collaboration between scientists and humanities and social science scholars to really get to some of the nitty-gritty issues around climate change and sustainability. Another related topic which I'm very keen to see flourish at ARI concerns food security. It's partly connected, of course, to climate change, as food production and consumption issues are both impacted by environmental change, but I think it's an important geopolitical issue and a question of equity and justice in its own right, so I'm very keen to see that grow. And I think the third area, which again I've been interested in for quite some time, is digital humanities. That's been given, I was going to say, a metaphorical shot in the arm by COVID-19. We've all been forced to adopt digital methods, perhaps in ways that we weren't doing a year or so ago, because we haven't been able to travel to our overseas research sites. Digital humanities, I think, is a important frontier of methodological innovation in the humanities and social sciences, and I really would like to see ARI at the cutting edge of some of those changes. While ARI clearly does have important, profound connections with the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences here, we are a university-level research institute. We're not directly situated in or an appendage to any one faculty, but rather we are meant to be a space that occupies and develops work from those interfaces across faculties, between the humanities and social sciences and the sciences. So yes, I think that's definitely part of ARI's remit. It was part of ARI's remit from the outset, but I think at this juncture, after 2 decades, it's one where this is a moment when ARI should be moving further into that direction. It doesn't mean moving away from arts and social sciences, not at all, but it means bringing the humanities and social sciences into closer collaboration and conversation with other parts of campus and other spheres and domains of knowledge. I think that ARI's place in the intellectual landscape of Asian studies is so well established now that it's really a time for ARI to be playing a leadership role in various ways. And one of those ways, I think, is to push the impact of Asian studies beyond Asianist audiences. Asia is way too important to be only of interest to Asianists. However you look at the world, whether it be in terms of demography, whether it be in terms of GDP, whether it be in terms of ecological impact, Asia is of global planetary significance. To only make Asian studies work speak to Asianists is a wasted opportunity. So I think one of the ways in which ARI can continue its leadership role is precisely to make sure that Asian-centered research speaks to wider disciplinary and global audiences. All the words that I came up with begin with P. One of them is precious. So it's precious to me in the sense that I feel like I've inherited something special and I really don't want to mess it up because it's such an important asset. It's a really valuable asset for NUS, for Singapore, for Asian studies. And in terms of challenging some of these and answering some of these big picture questions, I think ARI is an important resource for, it sounds really overstretched, for the world at this moment potentially. Precious means something that's precious you often think you can put a value on. So maybe the word priceless would actually be better, because I don't think you can put a monetary value on it, but you see what I mean, somewhere at the nexus of precious and priceless. The other P word that I think I would use to describe ARI is peerless. And again, that sounds like I'm really being boosterist or blowing the trumpet too loudly. But I say that because I think academic institutions are quite accustomed to ranking and benchmarking themselves against other institutions. It's incredibly difficult to do that for ARI, and the reason is because there is nowhere else like ARI. And we shouldn't feel bad about that, we should celebrate it, because many other institutes around the world, as I've discovered since I became director, look at ARI as their benchmark for how to be an Asian Studies Institute in the 21st century.